let's talk about the pork steak. I moved to St. Louis about 13, 14 years ago, and I had never really heard of the pork steak. Didn't realize it was a thing. Was introduced to it with a group of guys from a competition barbecue team that I was kind of hanging out with and helping out with a little bit, called Slabs of Smoking here in St. Louis. They still barbecue a little bit at Memphis in May every year as well. And they even have a website, extraordinarybarbq.com. Check it out, because I'm going to use their recipe today as I build this, because I learned it from those guys. So I want to give credit to them. All right. So in St. Louis, the pork steak has really been kind of a thing, or infamous here, since the late 1950s, because it was seen as more of an inexpensive piece of meat. I don't know if it's still inexpensive, but if you look at the meat market these days, meat in general is just highly expensive. So I picked up 2 thick cut bone-in pork steaks from my local grocery store here in St. Louis, because you can find them at all your grocery stores here in the region. These run $4.49 a pound, and so still not cheap, but definitely big cuts of meat. So this cost me about a little over 11 bucks. And I've got about 4.5 pounds of pork steaks here out of these 2 cuts of pork steaks. So let me show you what we're gonna do to marinate these steaks. We'll have them marinating in the refrigerator for a minimum of 2 hours. I'm probably gonna have them about 4 to 6 hours till later this evening. And then we're gonna throw them on the smoker. All right, so let's go ahead and get the marinade going. All right, so for that marinade today, we're gonna start with just a little bit of water. I'm going with about a cup of water. Now you could double this if you're doing more pork steaks, because I've only got 2 pork steaks. This is what I'm doing. So I'm gonna go about a cup of water in here. All right. And then I'm also gonna go with about a 1/2 cup of apple juice. And I got some really good apple juice here. I don't want that concentrated stuff. Got about 1/2 cup. Notice I'm just putting it all here in this big Pyrex 4-cup container here, so I can mix it together and pour it over my pork steaks, just to make it easy today for myself and fewer dishes to clean. All right, so we got that in there. So with this recipe, which I didn't realize was a thing, would taste good, but man, it works for the marinade. So next, we're gonna go with some Coca-Cola. If you don't have Coke, you can go with Pepsi, but Coca-Cola is probably your better choice here, my friends, all right? Because of the sugars and things that are in that Coca-Cola. So we're really looking, because of what I'm doing today, to add about 4 to 5 ounces of that Coke. All right. And then I'm gonna do the same with the old lemon lime Sprite. All right, so add a little Sprite in here as well. There we go. We're gonna do something special with these 2 in just a moment, all right? So I'll come back to those. All right, so we got those going. So now we're gonna go with some brown sugar. I'm using a dark brown sugar, all right? I love using dark versus light, but if you only have light, I'm sure you'll get by, all right? So I'm gonna go about a 1/4 cup here of that dark brown sugar that we're gonna place in here. And then I'm gonna do about the same amount of salt. So definitely add a lot of salt here for this. All right. Notice what it's doing to that soda, getting that fizz going in there. All right. Make sure you recognize that's going to happen at the same time. All right. And then I'm going to hit it with just a little bit fresh ground black pepper. And that is going to be our marinade. So I'm going to take now, you could use an aluminum pan. If you're used to using aluminum pans outside at home, and just wrap this in foil for what we're about to do. I'm gonna take kind of a bigger Pyrex container here, and I am going to open up those pork steaks. Let's check them out, my friends. Look how big these are. Look at that. Bone in. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and place these in my pan. All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and just simply pour my marinade right across the top. Because I'm using this longer Pyrex bowl here as well, that marinade fits just right, so it's just starting to cover those pork sticks. I can come back and flip them a little bit later if I wanted to as well. Get that in the trash. All right, throw the lid on. We're gonna take these inside, get them in the refrigerator. I'll see you guys back at the smoker in about 4 hours. So there is going to be a use for the remainder of that Sprite and Coke, all right? And you won't need a ton of it, so you may be able to save a little bit of this and consume it yourself while you're sitting outside on a hot day. But we're gonna kind of go 50-50 here, and we're gonna pour some of that Coca-Cola in the spray bottle. So as I'm putting these together, just so you know, once you have it in the spray bottle, you don't need to keep this cold. More of a room temperature is probably better because we'll be using this as a spritz for those pork steaks later, and we don't want to be hitting it with something really cold and bringing back down that temperature in the smoker. All right, now we're hit it with an equal amount of that Sprite. There we go. All right, so we'll go ahead and get that put back together. All right, and we'll be ready soon to get those pork steaks on the Oklahoma Joe. Okay, so it's been about 4 hours. I pulled those pork steaks back out of the refrigerator here. So let me show you how we're gonna go through this process to get them ready for the Oklahoma Joe. Oklahoma Joe is sitting pretty close to 225. We wanna hold that temperature between 225, no more than 250 as we get those pork steaks on today. And on that Oklahoma Joe today, I've got a little mix of applewood and hickory, just so you know. All right, so let me show you what we're gonna do. So we'll just go ahead and open these up. All right, so what we wanna do, now if you did these inside of your home, you could go ahead and pull them out of the refrigerator. These blowing in my pan there. So you could grab them out of the refrigerator and rinse them off under the sink real quick. It's all right, but we don't have that luxury today. So what we're gonna do, actually, is I'm gonna grab this water and I'm gonna create a little water bath here. So I've got the gloves on, and we're gonna kind of rinse off some of that brine, that marinade we used today. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and kind of rinse down that side, rinse down that side, and put them on my rack. All right, let's do the same with this pork steak. And rinse off that side, rinse off that side. There we go. All right. Then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna grab ourselves some paper towels. We're simply just going to kind of lightly pat these down, dry them off just a little bit so they're ready to go. All right, let's get both sides. All right. All right, so we did that part. So you know what? Come on over and let me show you what we're gonna do for the dry rub. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. So actually, this is gonna be what is the top of our pork steak. So I'm gonna flip them over first. All right. And we are going to do a little dry rub. You can use whatever you want for your dry rub, all right? Your own kind of like all-purpose seasoning, good pork seasoning, whatever you want to use. I'm going with the Blues Hog Original Dry Rub today. All right, we're gonna go nice, generous with that rub. All right, give that a good coating there, and we'll go ahead and flip it over. And we'll do the same thing on this side. All right, so because I'm gonna let these be the tops of my pork steaks today, I've got some honey. We're gonna use some honey to create a little sweetness on the top. You could also go maybe with a little agave or something, you know. We'll just give it a little bit of honey right across the top of these. All right, so I've got that Oklahoma Joe ready to go at 225. Let's take the rack and head on over. All right, you guys, don't forget to occasionally, about every 20-30 minutes, spray it down, give it a little misting, a little spritz with that Sprite and that Coca-Cola. Okay, you guys, it's been about an hour. Let's go ahead and grab these off the Oklahoma Joe, take them over to our table, and begin to wrap them, and we're gonna bring them back to the smoker. Okay, my friends, it is time to wrap and foil our pork steaks, all right? So I'm gonna grab myself 2 big old pieces of foil here, all right? And as I'm ripping those off, so as we talk about pork steaks, once again, this is like something that has, you know, based on folklore, it's kind of a St. Louis deal because of cost, because it's perfect for just low and slow barbecue, and it just really tastes great when you just finish it off with a barbecue sauce, which we are going to do today. All right, so let's go ahead and grab that first pork steak. So we're gonna grab one off, all right? We'll place it right here in that foil. I'm gonna go ahead and spritz it one more time, and then we'll go ahead and begin to wrap it, okay? Before we put it on the smoker. So, also according to folklore here in St. Louis, the pork steak really kind of originated with, there's a grocery store chain here called Schnucks. So it sounds like, based on what you read in the history of the pork steak, that this whole concept of doing this began from their store. So I'm not sure if that's true or not. I do know that Schnuck stores love to sell their pork steaks, but so do every other local grocery store around here too, because they know it is a St. Louis favorite. All right, so we've got these wrapped nice and tight. We're gonna put them back on that smoker, still at 225, for about another hour. Okay, we are in the process of grabbing those pork steaks back off of the Oklahoma Joe. Let's go ahead and close up that lid. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna open these up. Probably get lots of steam out of them. So I probed them through the foil a moment ago. They were all sitting between like 204 and 206. So definitely nice and hot. All right, so we're gonna open these up. And when I open them up, I'm gonna try to keep some of the juices in the bottom of that foil. All right, so we'll go ahead and lay them on my cutting board here. All right. And I'm gonna fold these up in case I wanna use some of that juice a little bit later for anything, although I probably will not. All right, so here's what next. I'm going to now give them a light coating, brushing on the tops with some barbecue sauce. We're going to throw them back on the smoker for about 10 minutes, give them a nice little glaze on the top before we give them a taste test. So I earlier used that Blues Hog original sauce or rub. So we're going to go now with the Blues Hog Champion sauce. I actually love this sauce. This is probably one of my favorites. So we're going to put some of that sauce across the top. And then I'm gonna grab myself my brush here and just kind of evenly spread that sauce on here. Notice I did not overcoat it. I'm not trying to kill my pork steak here, all right? With the sauce, I just want a light little glaze on those. All right, so we are going to now, I'm gonna take that one off. I'm gonna take my cutting board over, and we're gonna put these back on the smoker for about 10 minutes. All right, you guys, pork steaks are off of the Oklahoma Joe. Let's let them cool for a moment, and then we're gonna give them a taste test. Okay, you guys, so let's dive right on into our pork steaks, a St. Louis staple, all right? But doesn't mean you can't enjoy these anywhere you live, all right? Just slicing that Boston butt or that pork shoulder, and so that you have these pork steaks, all right? Ask your local butcher to do it for you if you can't find them where you are. They're becoming more and more popular throughout the US, but here in St. Louis, every local grocery store, every market, every butcher, they have these ready for us. So let's dive right on in. Got my knife here. We're gonna give this one a taste test. All right. Here we go. So I put a little bit of sauce on there and let it just sit on that smoker for about 10 more minutes. To be honest, if you're like me, if you do the meat right, you don't need a lot of sauce. So that's all we need, that light glaze, all right? You could have some sauce off to the side if you want to dip it in, or after that first taste, realize maybe I want a little more sauce, depending on how you cook your meat at home. But I think we're gonna be just about right. Let's see what we find out here. Oh, man. So, I just want to show you this with my hands. This just pulls right apart. just like a pulled pork at home, all right? So good. Absolutely delicious. You guys are going to love making pork steaks at home. And this recipe is money because it's not over the top, all right? Perfectly seasoned. That marinade is awesome. For my friends over at extraordinarybarbecue.com, Slabs of Smoking, shout out to you guys. I hope you're able to find pork steaks where you live. You got to try this recipe, my friends. We'll see you guys again on Bones and Brews.